Thank you for being here. You're in the Senate Finance Committee. It's Wednesday, January 22nd, and our second briefing of the day is the consumer's right to repair motor vehicles. And we have Mr. Bryson Popham has brought a panelist to the table, and whoever wants to start.
Thank you and good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bryson Popham appearing before you today on behalf of Safelite Group. My testimony is going to be very brief, just introducing the subject and why we're here today. But first, I'd like to introduce our panel. Many of you know Mr. Tom Tucker, who is with Safelite, and next to him, and appearing at my request is Mr. Christopher Allen, a senior counsel for Safelite. He'll be here to answer any questions the committee may have. And then at the end of the table, we have Mr. Michael Monet, who will be making the presentation that we have for you. The reason we're here today, and I'm happy to see, I don't have eyes in the back of my head, but I think in the back row, you'll see Mr. Sakamoto Wengel here. And he is a big part of the reason that we are here before you, because we have been discussing this subject for some time with the Attorney General's office. And in fact, on December 17th, we had a conference call with Mr. Sakamoto Wengel, his colleague, and Senator Feldman, who is interested in this issue. And the AG's office raised, I think, a very relevant question. Right to repair, I believe you know, is a subject that is making its way through various state legislatures. There's also a bill in Congress. We hope to have one in Maryland at some point. And the question that was raised by Mr. Sakamoto Wengel's colleague on the 17th was, well, how does the data you're looking at interact with our Data Privacy Act that we just passed in Maryland? That was a very good question, and that has set us to work. So we have some expert testimony for your consideration before we proceed with any kind of litigation. We think it's responsible, and I commend you, Madam Chair, for agreeing to this briefing as a first step in gathering the necessary information. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Mr. Tucker with your permission, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Tom Tucker, Assistant Vice President of Legislative Affairs for Safelite. For the record, Safelite is the leading provider of automotive glass repair, replacement, and recalibration services in the country. We are part of Belron International, which is the largest vehicle glass recalibration, replacement, repair glass company in the world. We operate in 38 countries. We are what we call, no one does glass better than us. Again, thank you, Madam Chair, and the committee for this briefing and the opportunity to speak about the Consumer Right to Repair Act. This is an emerging issue, and it's an emerging issue that poses real questions about the future of auto repair and what rights does the consumer have as it relates to auto repair. The auto that they own, they operate, and they insure. Now, for context, the personal computers that you all have in front of you have about 100. They have about 50 million lines of code in them. The Hubble telescope has about 2 million lines of code. A modern vehicle has about 150 million lines of code in it. So a modern vehicle is nothing more than computers on wheels, and it's producing lots of data all the time. So the surge in code complexity and the need for cybersecurity and software underscores the importance of this issue in repair and the ownership of your vehicles. Who repairs your vehicles becomes important. How they're repaired becomes an important consideration. As Bryson said, the right to repair movement has gained considerable momentum. Numerous states are considering enacting legislation across the country. Since 2020, 40 states have introduced some sort of right to repair legislation. Those topics accompany multiple industries, from agricultural, cell phones, tablets, home appliances, wheelchairs, as well as automotive. But the core aim of right to repair is really this: to give individuals and independent repair shops equal access and the legal right to access the service information, replacement parts, and software tools needed to fix their personal property, and or to authorize access for the repairs of their choice. As I said previously, several states have already enacted or considering comprehensive right to repair laws. California, Colorado, Massachusetts, Maine, Minnesota, and New York, among others. Currently this year, 25 states are considering legislation on right to repair. Now, some vehicle manufacturers and industry groups have voiced concerns about the impact of right to repair on safety and intellectual property and cybersecurity, and they're absolutely right. These are real concerns. They're very real concerns. As Bryson said, there's a federal effort on the right to repair. 2 bills have been introduced, and they've been less successful. But the issue of right to repair really should be studied very carefully, and that's actually why we're here today, to ensure access to data, cybersecurity, and the repairs are done properly according to the vehicle manufacturer's specifications. The industry has been governed since 2013 by a memorandum of understanding entered by the automakers and aftermarket groups. However, it's a voluntary pact, a handshake agreement. Many will argue that an MOU is really not strong enough and lacks enforcement authority. It's not legally binding and relies on the automaker's voluntary compliance. In 2023, a new MOU was signed, not by a wide range of stakeholders, but rather by a small group of repairers aligned with the automakers. The automakers view the MOU as a positive development, and so do we. But its effectiveness really hinges on 2 things: the automakers' commitments to the principles along with the industry, and more importantly, the future adoption of enforceable regulations to ensure its long-term success. Regulations, that's why it's important. Last year, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, 2 people who are ideologically opposed on just about every issue, penned a joint letter to the vehicle manufacturers criticizing their opposition to federal right to repair legislation while simultaneously selling the vehicle data. The automakers claim that giving third-party access to what would be proprietary manufactured data opens up cybersecurity and privacy risk. However, vehicle manufacturers routinely share and sell owner information to insurance companies and other third parties. At least 37 car companies have been identified for monetizing vehicle data that they claim have privacy risk. So if the MOU is working effectively, why are the repairers fighting so hard, repairers fighting for right to repair legislation, and why are the manufacturers spending millions to oppose it? So let me just ask you this question, and it's a hypothetical question to the committee. Since the vehicle manufacturers oppose right to repair legislation and unequivocally claim that the MOU is effective, would the manufacturers support allowing the consumer to sign an MOU when purchasing a new vehicle, rather than a signed contract that has the force of law, penalties, enforcement mechanisms if the consumer defaults? Shouldn't the consumer have the same legal protections with regard to the data that they're generating? Last year, again, as Bryson said, we began these conversations with Maryland elected officials, and we were referred here because of the several questions. Who owns the data? Should the repaired data be considered personal data? And what connectivity is it between the Right to Repair Initiative and the recently enacted data privacy laws? We want to say unequivocally to Senator Giles and members of the committee, we're not asking to reopen or trash the data privacy law because we support it, but we're just wanting to know what is the nexus between the two. And so we're simply asking, because they're legitimate concerns, that the committee consider those issues. And we ask for a study to study and come back with those findings so that Maryland consumers, repairers, and your constituents would know that answer. And with that, I turn it over to Mr. Minot. We'd be glad to answer your questions also at the end of this presentation.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Chairman Beidel and Vice Chairman Hayes, members of the committee, for inviting SafeLight to submit this written testimony regarding the need to ensure Marylanders have easy access to and use of the personal data produced by their physical devices, including vehicles that they own and lease. SafeLight shares the committee's goal of protecting Marylanders' privacy, control, and use of their personal data. SafeLight believes that in a world of highly complex vehicles where they not only move us from place to place, but they also collect and create voluminous data about our driving behavior, and they use systems to keep us safe in our vehicles, in our travels, and consumers and third parties should be able to readily access the data generated by their vehicle at no cost. In fact, such access is a matter of public safety, as potential issues with our vehicles put occupants, other motorists, and bystanders at risk. Although these comments will speak primarily to vehicle data because that is SafeLight's expertise, the same principles would hold true for other physical devices such as cell phones, tablets, computers, and others. As explained in more detail below, the Maryland Online Data Privacy Act of '24 contains a mechanism for consumers to obtain access to personal data. However, this law contains ambiguities and limitations that prevent consumers from fully utilizing the benefit of their device data. SafeLight encourages the committee to conduct a study to assess areas for potential revision to the MODPA, ensuring, one, that device data that can be directly or indirectly linked to an identifiable person is clearly understood as personal data under MODPA, and two, customers and their choice of authorized service providers can access such data quickly and without cost. The first point, device data is personal data. The MODPA enshrines the principle that consumers have the right to control their personal data. It defines personal data as, quote, any information that is linked or can reasonably link to an identified or identifiable consumer, close quote. Vehicle data, including telematics data produced by the vehicle and diagnostic data such as fault codes, can in fact be linked to an identified or identifiable consumer in multiple ways. Two scenarios help explain this. First, imagine a consumer visiting a SafeLight location to receive vehicle service. SafeLight logs the consumer's name and contact information and the VIN of the vehicle to be serviced. The SafeLight technician plugs a diagnostic scan tool into the vehicle and retrieves diagnostic data. Such diagnostic data is automatically associated with the VIN through the tool's software, or the technician could associate it manually. Because the customer's name and contact information is associated with the VIN, and the VIN is associated with the diagnostic data can reasonably be linked to that consumer. In the second scenario, when a consumer purchased the vehicle, the original manufacturer received a report from the dealership identifying the purchaser, their contact information, and the VIN associated with the vehicle. As the vehicle is driven, telematics and diagnostic data of the vehicle is automatically collected, and the OEM and related or linked into its systems in the vehicle's VIN. As in the above scenarios, because the OEM has the consumer's name and contact information in its database associated with the vehicle's VIN, and the collected vehicle data is associated with the VIN, such data is linkable to the consumer. A is linked to B, B is linked to C, therefore A is linked to C. Some may argue that the vehicle data associated with the VIN is not personal data because one may not know that the consumer it is believed to relate to was the individual driving the vehicle when the data was generated. This position simply misses the point. Regardless of who is driving the vehicle at the time it generated the data, if the data is associated with the VIN or any other unique identifier that is tied to an individual, it reasonably can be and most likely will be linked to the consumer who is associated with the VIN. Put another way, the law does not specify which consumer the data must be associated with, only that it be capable of an association to a consumer. Accordingly, SafeLight's position is that vehicle data is personal data. In fact, SafeLight provides access to vehicle data it collects that is associated with a consumer when that consumer makes a verified request under their state's comprehensive privacy law to access their personal data. Original manufacturers' privacy notices also often include vehicle data as a type of personal data. For example, and I'm going to quote here, FCA US, quote, "We collect and derive personal information through our connected services, including information about you and your vehicle, as well as other users of your vehicle, and the services such as vehicle usage and performance data, driving data, geolocation data, settings and presets and features, and services accessed and used, including third-party provided, and other information related to your use of our connected services," close quotes. Ford Motor Company. Ford and Lincoln vehicles have systems that record data about how the vehicle is performing, how it is driven, where it is located, and the environment where it is operated. This data may be associated with a vehicle's unique identification number or other identifiers, and VIN or other identifiers may be linked to you. General Motors is interesting in that, in their quote, "The types of personal information that GM collects about you and when you interact with us include information about your vehicle or information that is obtained from your vehicle that is linked to you or can be linked to you. For example, we may be able to link information to you from your vehicle, including license plate information, vehicle identification number, vehicle status, including mileage, oil battery status, ignition, window, door lock, trunk lock, vehicle diagnostic information, EV charging and discharging, and stationary energy storage details," close quotes. The same logic would apply to data generated or by or derived from any physical device if such data is associated with a unique identifier that is connected to a consumer. Cell phones, computers, mobility aids, my smart doorbell, all of these things generate data. Often, data generated by or derived from these devices is tied to a unique identifier, such as an IMEI, a MAC address, or a device ID. The unique identifiers frequently are or can be, through matching with other data sets, tied to an identifiable consumer. Accordingly, data derived from these devices should also be treated as personal data under MODPA. At the end of the day, explicitly clarifying that the MODPA treats device data that can be linked, directly or indirectly, such as through association with a VIN or other identifier, to an identified or identifiable consumer would resolve any ambiguity and protect consumer rights. Next, timely no-cost access is vital to preserve consumer interests. The MODPA allows consumers to request access to their personal data from the data controller for free once every 12-month period. Generally, data controllers make available a web form and/or a toll-free number through which a consumer may make such requests under other states' privacy laws, and one would expect a similar approach to be taken under MODPA. The law allows the data controller 45 days plus one additional 45-day extension under certain circumstances to provide access to the personal data. If the data controller denies the request, necessitating an appeal by the consumer, the controller may take up to 60 days to fulfill the appeal. This means it may take a consumer up to 150 days from when they initially make the request to receive access to their personal data. Although 150 days may be sufficient for obtaining personal data out of curiosity or a desire to archive historical information, in the context of obtaining vehicle or other device data, it is unacceptably long. If the consumer needs access to their vehicle data to provide it to their authorized service technician in connection with a vehicle repair, especially if that repair is urgent, and failing to complete it may render the vehicle inoperable or unsafe. For example, driving with a chipped or cracked windshield may increase the risk of sudden catastrophic windshield failure that could not only result in harm to the vehicle occupants, but also loss of control of the vehicle, potentially injuring the motorist, other motorists, and bystanders. Delaying this repair through the passage of time or by limiting who can make such a repair, creating a bottleneck, is a risk to the public health and safety, and any arguments to the contrary to such position are inapposite to consumer well-being. Additionally, because much of the vehicle data is stored on board in the vehicle, the OEM may not be able to provide it by the traditional access request process, necessitating a method for the consumer or their authorized agent to access the onboard systems that store the data and retrieve it. OEMs may unfairly erect technological and/or financial barriers to accessing this onboard data. When a vehicle service provider seeks to retrieve diagnostic data from a vehicle, it can do so with physical access to the vehicle and a specialized tool that can read and report the diagnostic data. However, certain types of diagnostic data and systems that generate such data, such as those related to the safety system recalibration following a windshield replacement, require OEM authentication or access to OEM software to access that onboard data and systems. OEMs typically charge fees for authentication or access to their software, either directly or by payments to third-party providers that can provide access due to their relationship with the OEM. In 2024, Safelite paid one third-party provider more than $9 million on such authentication and access. Because of Safelite's scale, it is able to absorb these costs to lower the impact on each individual consumer. But such fees could become prohibitively expensive. In Safelite's experience, these fees can be upwards of $100 per vehicle. Such costs may also prevent small repair shops from offering the services because they are not capable of absorbing those costs to remain competitive or cannot afford upfront setup fees, annual licensing, or purchasing specialized tools that may be required. These costs could make it difficult for consumers, particularly those in small towns and rural areas, without immediate access to a franchise dealership, to readily obtain necessary repairs that are convenient and affordable. Additionally, these fees and access as a whole are completely subject to the whims of OEM, and they could unilaterally increase fees, limit access to preferred service providers, or block access entirely if they so choose to in the future. More critically, the true question is why should a consumer or their chosen authorized service provider be required to pay fees at all to access the consumer's own data on the consumer's own device? The MODPA also requires that the consumer's personal data, if it is automatically processed, be provided to the consumer in a, quote, portable and to the extent technologically feasible, readily usable format that allows the consumer to easily transmit the data to another controller without hindrance, close quote. As evidenced by this provision in the current law, one of the MODPA's goals is to ensure that consumers may easily make their personal data available to third parties of their choosing without interference. Paywalls and other manufacturer restrictions on access and use of device data clearly inhibit the goal. Safelite is also concerned that device manufacturers may argue that it is not technologically feasible to provide the data in a readily usable format because they have not developed the technological means to do so. This lack of investment on the part of a manufacturer should not be a barrier to a consumer having access to and use of their device data. And manufacturers should be obligated to invest in systems that allow export in a reasonably, readily usable format and easily transmitted to the consumer or third party of their choosing. SafeLight encourages the committee to launch a study to answer a few questions. One, what can be done to ensure that Marylanders have access for the purpose of vehicle repair to their personal data that is generated from or stored upon their personal devices without interference from device manufacturers, along with the ability to easily transfer that personal data to a third party they authorize. The second, in situations where access is time sensitive, such as in connection with the repair of the device, what legislative changes are needed in the future to ensure Marylanders can access their data and associated systems in real time or in near real time? And three, among the states that have data privacy laws, how are they addressing the issue of the right to repair? SafeLight has considered changes to MODPA to achieve these goals and believes that legislative action to create an express right of consumers to their authorized service and their authorized service providers to timely, cost-free access to their personal data generated by or stored on their physical devices is appropriate. When access is time sensitive, such as in the case of a need to repair the device, the manufacturer should provide a cost-free real-time access method. After all, this data is derived from or located on the consumer's device, and the consumer should be able to control and fully utilize their data for their benefit. SafeLight would be pleased to provide further input during the study process. Finally, in conclusion, SafeLight appreciates the committee's attention to this issue and the ability to provide its perspective on how to ensure Marylanders have access to data generated by their devices and automobiles that they own for purposes of diagnosis and repair. The changes SafeLight is asking you to consider are not limited to glass repair, but its implications, really, when you think about it in terms of a consumer being able to use their own data, their own information, are much broader than glass and impacts the entire vehicle repair industry. Together, we stand ready to respond to any questions the committee may have on the topic, and for that, I thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the panel that chooses to speak? That's it. I just knew Senator Guile would have a question. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you, Tom, Bryson, and the members of the panel. You know, obviously the opponents push back on this issue and will say that what you're characterizing as personal data is in fact proprietary information. I'm just wondering, and I guess whomever you think may be best to respond to this question, perhaps you could respond to what their position is.
It's nice to meet you, Senator Guile. I'm Christopher Allen with SafeLight Group. I would disagree that the OEMs could characterize the data that's on the vehicle as proprietary data for purposes of repairing the vehicle. When you plug a scan tool into an OBD2 port, which is like the serial bus for your handheld device to communicate with the vehicle, what you're pulling down is status information of particular sensors. So you may see that an emission sensor isn't operating properly, or sometime within the last week your ABS sensor was failing. The type of data that we need to access for purpose of vehicle glass repair and replace is accessing, in the present tense, the status of the cameras that are used to pick up the lines on the road. We access that as part of a recalibration process, and that tells us that after we replace the vehicle, the cameras are looking in the right spot on the road. Because if they are looking over here, then the vehicle will use its lane keep assist function to drift the vehicle over, when in fact, the lanes are over here. And so whether or not the cameras are pointed in the proper direction would not be a proprietary piece of their intellectual property. It is the status of the vehicle, no different than how many volts are left in the battery or how much gasoline is left in the tank.
And is it possible, as you're downloading this information, I guess, because I know that they'll say that they have legitimate IP concerns to like parse out what information, I guess, is personal data versus, what their IP is. Is that to try and understand? Because I'm not a mechanic. I don't know what exactly data is downloaded. But is that possible?
No, I do not believe that's possible. Actually, so much so that when a consumer submits a verified request for access to what data we collect about them, we provide them with a full copy of the scan tool results that will show whether or not particular sensors are operating and functioning, and will show, most importantly to us, that the cameras that are pointed through the windshield are functioning properly. So there's no concern of proprietary information. And for some of the equipment, you can purchase it on Amazon to run initial scans.
Okay. And just one more question, Madam Chair. I think one of the key things, I really like this issue. And I think one of the key things in this discussion is, with the difference of costs, for people to be like, how much does it cost for someone to go to use SafeLight to repair versus taking it to the manufacturer? And I know that may not necessarily be in the technical aspects of data ownership, but I'm just wondering, I think that's helpful information, because I think that some of the restrictions that exist on that access to the, based on the manufacturer's position IP is large part of them wanting to control the market, right, on the repairs. So maybe if you could comment on the differences of cost for the consumer.
First, I'm not going to address that specifically, the differences in cost, because I don't know what the cost is for the manufacturer.
Sure.
But let me address it a little bit differently. First of all, the manufacturers will tell you that they provide all the information needed to do a repair. That's absolutely correct. They do provide it. There's an MOU. There are multiple means that they do provide the data and the information. The challenge is, as vehicles become more sophisticated and technologically savvy, there are more firewalls, more barriers to get access to that data. But while they provide that data, and I will always say they do provide it, the challenge is, can you run a business on a handshake agreement? Because there are many instances where we as a company and other repairers did not have access, and there was no means to get access. You're running your business at the whim of someone else. One real-time example, a year ago, we could not access two specific models of Nissan and one Infiniti. And our scan tool could not talk to those vehicles. So we could either send the vehicles to the dealership or another repair shop. But what we ended up doing is buying a scan tool or using another access, and it cost the company $15 million. I'm sorry, that's not true. $25,000 a month for 15 months.
25,000. Wow.
Yeah, and so I'm answering your question, but I'm answering it in a different way.
Yeah.
They provide it, but your scan tool has to work. But if they lock down their systems, and then you have to then find a way around, and one of those ways around it is getting an OEM scan tool or another scan tool that has access. $2,500 a month for 15 months is what SafeLight had to pay.
Wow. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? I don't see any questions. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are right on time. Tammy needs a couple of minutes, and then we'll.
Do we have?
Did we have one? Oh, I'm sorry. I missed a person. Thank you. Wayne Weichel from Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Thank you.
Ooh, look at that. Got it. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Wayne Weichel. I'm here with the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Look at that. The Alliance for Automotive Innovation is a DC trade association representing the automakers that manufacture about 97% of all new cars sold in the U.S. each year. Roughly, we represent everyone except Tesla, Rivian, and Lucid. We even represent Ineos and VinFast, which I'm going to bet none of you have even seen on the road yet, but brand new companies that you will see soon, Vietnamese and British respectively. We also represent major Tier 1 suppliers, other technology companies, and AV startups. Let me just start by saying automakers support right to repair, and I do appreciate the chairwoman's foresight to have this hearing, give us the opportunity to talk about this today. 3 things to remember. As Mr. Tucker so kindly put forward for me, automakers do provide all the information necessary to service and diagnose a vehicle, and they have done that for many years. I figured I would have to argue that point more, but I appreciate his acknowledging that point. Second, when it comes to providing consumers with a range of repair options, automakers are the gold standard. You can bring your car to a dealership, you can bring it to a national chain, you can bring it to an independent repairer, or if you're technologically inclined, you can take on the repair yourself. That's unlike any other consumer product out there, and it's all because automakers make this information available. Third, as you'll see in this presentation, automakers work with repairers in service to their shared customer. It is not an adversarial relationship. They understand that having a bad repair experience cuts into brand loyalty, and that makes sense. I mean, I think all of you have had that experience, whether you yourself or someone else that you know has had a bad repair experience. They tell everyone. So automakers understand that this does matter to brand loyalty and keeping customers coming back. Just a quick history lesson of how we got here. Starting in 1996, the OBD2 port the gentleman before me referenced was standardized across all vehicles. And from 1996 to about 2002, it really was the Wild West. Every automaker had a different approach, and it was really difficult for independent repairers to keep up with automotive technology. In 2002, so 23 years ago now, automakers signed what we refer to as the Dorgan Letter. It was a U.S. senator at the time, and we agreed to provide all the information necessary to complete repairs to independent repairers, including tools. And that existed for, roughly 16 years? Roughly 10 years, since 16 years after the OBD2 came out, where there was a ballot question in Massachusetts, which codified the Dorgan Letter, but also added a reasonableness on cost. It also closed a telematics loophole as to the use of remote data. And it also required the use of a standardized interface. You didn't need only the OEM's tool to gain access. And that system has worked well, as Mr. Tucker had indicated. But automakers have sort of built on that. They haven't just relied on the letter of the law. They went out and created something called the National Automotive Service Task Force, or NASTF. NASTF serves as a venue for repairers and automakers to get together to talk about issues when they arise. It provides a venue for those discussions so people don't come running to you with problems that aren't really problems and may just be some misunderstanding. This NASTF group is also responsible for verifying all locksmiths to make sure only the appropriate people do it. That's all because of this NASTF group. We also went out and created OEM One Stop, OEM original equipment manufacturer. You can go to this website yourself. We created it so that a repairer, say they only deal with Toyotas and Hondas, and someone rolls in with a Mercedes-Benz, and they don't really know where to go to Mercedes-Benz to get this. They can go to OEM One Stop. Real simple, connects to Mercedes networks and everyone else's network as well, just to make this easier. But the interesting thing, this isn't used that much because repairers have so many other options in the marketplace to get data that this is really only for those edge cases where someone's dealing with a car they haven't repaired previously. So what has that led to? I'll give you a second here to read this quote from the FTC. Did a report called Nixing the Fix, where they investigated right to repair across the entire economy, not just auto sector, all the other manufacturing sectors as well. And they pointed it to the automaker, this highlighted section here, created a broad, if not complete, right to repair in the automotive industry across the US. And they highlighted in the second quote here that auto industry has taken important steps to expand consumer choice that other industries that impose restrictions have not followed suit. So, we are the gold standard in this space. Here's another quote, a guy by the name of Kyle Wiens. He is the leader of the sort of larger digital right to repair movement, which I know there was a bill here a few years ago, to not just autos, but to take what autos do and apply it to absolutely everyone else. Here's his quote: individuals and third-party shops obtain the same electronic diagnostic information available to dealers. That competition keeps prices reasonable while also stabilizing insurance rates. So what you've seen is all the states that have passed digital right to repair bills that apply to phones, computers, TVs, they've all excluded autos. And why is that? That's because automakers do provide the parts, the tools, and the repair information needed to complete repairs. We haven't just stuck to what had worked previously. We understand that technology advances. So we signed a new MOU in 2023 with repair groups. The first repair agreement was with part manufacturers. This repair agreement was actually with repairers, because as I said, a good repair experience matters to brand loyalty. So what does this new repair agreement do? And the QR code there, I could have printed this out for you, but I figured I'd save about 8 pages of explaining this when it came out. It applies to all diagnostic and repair information needed for vehicles. It applies to telematics data. It applies to ICE vehicles as well as EVs and other new technologies. It applies to third-party tool manufacturers. And also, most importantly, it creates a working group so that automakers and repairers can continue to work together in service to their shared customers. So if things are so great in the right to repair movement, why do you keep hearing about right to repair in the automotive sector? I appreciate that. I worked in a legislature in another state. When you hear about something over and over and over, you assume that if there's smoke, there just must be fire. So let's take a look at some of the states that have worked on this issue. The first thing I will say, if you remember only this, not every repairer group actually represent repairers. Who's paying the bills? Massachusetts, they opted for a ballot question in both 2012 and 2020. I should note they opted for a ballot question because they got nowhere moving their language in the legislature. So they opted to go around the legislature to go to a ballot question. And here's what they raised. Nearly $25 million they raised, 99.997% from out-of-state part manufacturers and retailers, not in-state repairers. 99.997. I put that exact number there because I was accused once that I said all their money came from out of state. And okay, fine. It was not 100%. Out of that $24 million, they raised $5,000 from in-state. Let's go to Maine. Maine had a ballot question almost the exact same as Massachusetts in 2023. They raised $5 million, a lot cheaper to run a ballot question in Maine. 99.99% came from out-of-state part manufacturers and retailers, not repairers. Who's paying the bills? Now, there's also a federal effort going on. There's a federal bill, as the gentleman before me referenced. Again, not pushed by repairers. We don't know the funding of this, a federal group, but these are their members on their website. Aftermarket part companies, AutoZone, ABPA is Auto Body Part Association, CAPA does automotive part certifications, and LKQ, which is the largest supplier of aftermarket parts. Insurers and part platforms, who are the ones who facilitate the sale of these aftermarket parts, not repairers. So who did we partner with? We partnered with the Automotive Service Association and the Society of Collision Repair Specialists for our agreement in 2023. As Mr. Tucker referenced before me, We did not sign this with a wide range of actors, only repairers. Well, if we're talking about whether repairers have the information they need to serve their customers, don't you think agreement with repairers is the right thing? In ASA, largest and oldest national organizations that their members own and operate automotive repair facilities. SCRS, more collision focused, 6,000 repair businesses, 5,800 repairers across the country. Automakers provide the information necessary to complete repairs. They understand that having a good repair experience is important, and that is why they partner with repairers. I should also note, if any of you have been in a collision, the vast, vast, vast majority of certified repair shops out there that automakers have created, they're not associated to dealers. They're independent repair shops that service these vehicles on a regular basis. I think I can stop there. I hope this is clear. Automakers do not oppose right to repair. And just to the example that was used in a question before about SafeLight's scan tool didn't work, so they had to get another choice. And they had SafeLight's scan tool didn't work. Other third-party tool manufacturers' products did work. How is that the automaker's responsibility that they made a tool that didn't necessarily work with the Nissan system? Other automakers did make other third-party manufacturers did make tools that work with those systems. Maybe Nissan and other companies aren't doing it the way they want, but there are other options in the marketplace, which is what they took advantage of. And I will stop with that and happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. I don't see any questions from the committee. Weichel, right, Mr. Weichel?
Yes, that's correct.
So do you need a different scan tool for each manufacturer?
It's a great question. You do not. However, as part of the 2012 Massachusetts law, which then got codified into this 2014, automakers work with scan tool companies so that the scan tool company, which is a separate company, they develop what they think suits their customers. They take what an automaker gives them and then wraps it into a tool that they sell. If you boil down this issue, I'm sure you've heard it from maybe yourself personally, or you go to a shop and they're like, oh, we can't fix that. You have to go back to a dealership. What they're really saying is the tool I bought doesn't apply to that because they bought the thing that applies to the bell curve. And this is one of those edge cases that the tool that I bought, which was cheaper, doesn't fit that. And the reason you see a shop might do mostly German cars or mostly, Toyota and Honda or things like that is because they've decided that for their business model, they want to buy the tool that applies to everything. I'm someone who actually does their own work on their car, and I have an older Land Cruiser, and I had an airbag issue, and I bought a scan tool. And before I bought a scan tool, I said, okay, it's a quality scan tool, not a cheap thing off Amazon. This is a really professional. And as I was reading, this one that's $235 doesn't address airbags and brake systems. So I had to buy the one that was $500 because I wanted those extra things, which were rare. You don't usually have a lot of airbag issues. So it always boils down to what did you buy? Why did you buy it? And there are some repair shops out there that have made the decision that they only service one type of car, and they will buy just the OEM's tool. They won't even buy an aftermarket tool because that's what fits their business. But that is something that we see a lot of, that a lot of repairers don't necessarily explain to their consumer well, that yes, and that's a completely okay reason to not buy. I didn't buy that, we don't see enough of those, it's not worth it to us. I hope that answers your question, probably longer than expected.
Well, I'm just thinking about how many different tools a general repair shop would need if they were working on a variety of vehicles. It sounds like they'd need a lot of different scan tools.
They do. However, there is a middle of the bell curve. And with products it used to be, I don't want to say dumb tools, but dumb tools what they came with is what they had. tools are a lot smarter now. They can access the web. There's actually some really cool new tools that are being put out there that you just plug it in. It's just a little device, you plug it in, and it's not attached to your scan tool. It goes from that connection over the internet to someone who has the OEM tool and then sends you the report via email. So using it telematically, which is a whole new way to do it. But realistically for scan tools, yes, there's a middle of the bell curve that most people deal with that services 85, 90% of the customers. And, for those edge cases, they either buy the tool, rent the tool. There's mobile companies that will come to your shop and do it for you if it is those edge cases. And the place we see that a lot in is safety systems, which need exact calibrations. Sometimes that's easier just to farm out to a third party.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions for this witness? Nothing. Thank you very much.
thank you.
And that does end the presentation for the briefing on consumers' right to repair. We are going to take a couple-minute break while Tammy sets up for our bill hearing.